I never thought the people who raised me would drag me into court over the very house I worked my entire life to afford. Since 15, I hustled through shifts, paid for college alone, built a career, and finally bought my first home. The night I held those keys, my parents said I had stolen my sister's future. Suddenly, I wasn't their daughter but their enemy. What began as a dream of independence twisted into betrayal so deep it nearly broke me. This is not just about a house. It's about survival, truth, and reclaiming my life. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. The Quinns had polished smiles, coordinated outfits at Thanksgiving, and a photo album that made neighbors whisper, "What a close family." My parents, Monica and Graham, curated every picture for social media, always signing off with captions like "Family First" or "We always stand together." For years, I let those images define us, even when the truth was more complicated. When I signed the papers for my first home at 35, my chest swelled with pride. Every late-night shift, every tuition payment scraped together without a dime from my parents had led me here. Holding the keys, I wanted to shout it from the rooftops. Instead, my mother's voice cut me down. "Don't flaunt it, Avery. It looks tacky when you brag." My sister Brielle, lounging across the sofa, smirked like I had committed a crime. Brielle had never held a steady job. For years, she called herself an artist between projects. Yet somehow, she always had her bills covered. Mom called it supporting creativity. Dad called it investing in potential. I called it what it was: endless excuses. Still, when anyone asked, Brielle was the jewel of the family, the misunderstood visionary. I was just the workhorse. That night, as I offered to cook dinner to celebrate, Mom smiled faintly and mentioned something strange. "Do you remember Avery? We always said the eldest daughter's home would one day be the family's nest. You promised, didn't you?" I froze, spatula in hand. A promise? I had no memory of such a vow. Yet, the way she said it, soft, almost nostalgic, made me wonder if I was forgetting something or if she was rewriting history. Graham nodded from his chair. "Your mother's right. We've talked about this for years." My stomach twisted. This wasn't nostalgia. This was a seed being planted. That same week, my phone buzzed at midnight. My doorbell camera sent an alert. Motion detected at the front door. Half asleep, I tapped the screen and my blood chilled. A shadow bent close, fingers jiggling something in the lock. Someone was trying a key. My key. Or rather, a copy of it. The screen pixelated before the figure walked off into the night. My heart pounded in my throat. If it were you, would you change the locks immediately or wait and see what they tried next? Key or wait? The next evening, my parents invited me over for what they called a belated housewarming dinner. I should have known it was no celebration. The table was set neatly, candles lit, but the air felt heavy. Midway through the meal, Graham leaned forward, his expression deceptively casual. "So, Avery, you're planning to give Brielle the master bedroom, right? She needs space for her studio." My fork clattered onto the plate. "Excuse me?" Brielle twirled her wine glass, eyes glittering. "It makes sense. I could finally have room to paint, and you won't even be there most weekends." I tried to laugh it off, but Monica's gaze was unblinking. "Sacrifice is a tradition in this family, Avery. You've always known that. What you have, you share. It's how we survive." Gaslighting. I recognized it now, though I hadn't had the words for it before. They were rewriting obligation as heritage, guilt as love. Later that night, I scrolled Brielle's social media. Her latest post made bile rise in my throat. A photo of her sketchpad captioned, "Finally, a real studio is coming together." Dreaming big, commenters cheered her on. "Can't wait to see it, Brielle. You deserve it." Not one mention of me. The next day, a delivery arrived at my doorstep. Inside was a golden picture frame, ornate and heavy, with a glossy family portrait inside. A note from Mom. "For your living room, dear." A reminder that your family is always with you. I wanted to believe it was simply sentimental. But when I picked it up, the backplate rattled. Curiosity prickled. I slid the cardboard free and my breath caught. Taped to the back was a small brass key. Not mine, not cut from my set. It was older, the teeth worn, but it fit the brand of my locks. Why would they send me a frame with a spare key hidden inside? I sat at the kitchen table, the frame before me, my hands shaking. Was this just a mistake? A forgotten key tucked inside by chance? Or was it a statement? For a moment, exhaustion washed over me. I set the key aside, brewed a cup of tea, and reached for an old birthday card Monica had written when I was 21. "We're proud of you, our responsible daughter. You'll carry us far." At the time, it had felt like love. Now, it read like a contract. I tried to breathe in the steam, convincing myself my family's love was simply clumsy, awkward. Maybe they didn't know how their words cut. Maybe the key meant nothing sinister at all. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe they were just a family, not predators circling their own child. But deep down, I knew the cracks in the golden image had spread too far to be ignored. It started with an email from my mother, crisp and businesslike, as if she were writing to a client instead of her daughter. "Avery, this arrangement benefits everyone. For tax purposes, it makes sense if you hold the title temporarily, then transfer ownership to Brielle in stages. That way, the family keeps the equity without penalties." I reread the message 3 times, my chest tightening with every line. She had dressed theft in the language of strategy, betrayal in the language of prudence. When I called her, Monica spoke as though she were offering me a gift. "Think long-term, Avery. You're practical. Brielle needs stability. This is how you show love." My phone buzzed again. Brielle's newest post flashed across the screen. A bright photo of her sketchbook, paint splattered across the page, captioned, "Our family is finally opening a creative community space." Location, my sister's place. She tagged the street where my house stood. By evening, cousins and uncles had filled my inbox with congratulations for Brielle. "She deserves it after all her struggles. Your sister is so lucky to have you." Not one of them mentioned me. My house, my sacrifice, had already been rewritten as Brielle's victory. At work, I tried to bury myself in reports, but whispers followed me. A colleague leaned across the cubicle wall. "Just ignore it. Family drama always looks messy in public. Best to stay quiet." Stay quiet. Stay complicit. I smiled faintly and nodded, though silence was choking me. The isolation settled heavier each day. I stopped checking social media. I ignored texts from relatives. Even friends grew hesitant, unsure how to console someone whose parents were plotting against her. At night, I wandered through the rooms of my new house, feeling less like an owner and more like a trespasser in a space already claimed by others. Then came the alarm. At 2 a.m., the shriek jolted me upright. My security system screamed from the back door. I stumbled down the hallway, phone clutched tight, the glow of the app revealing what I feared. The door had been opened not by force, but by a valid key. Someone had walked in as if they belonged. The siren wailed. My hands trembled over the dial screen. If it were you, would you call 911 or call your mother? The next morning, Graham arrived at my doorstep carrying a leather folder. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he sighed, sliding out papers with notarized seals. Draft agreements, already formatted for me to sign, promising to reassign property in the interest of family harmony. He called it compromise. I called it erasure. When I refused to take the folder, his jaw hardened. "Do you really want to be the reason this family falls apart?" A few days later, Brielle posted a video online. Her cheeks were pale, her voice quivering. "I've been so sick lately. Stress has made everything worse. I just need a safe place to heal." A GoFundMe link appeared at the bottom, donations pouring in by the hour. She was crafting a story where my refusal to surrender my house was the cause of her decline. Mom whispered in my ear at a family gathering, her tone syrupy sweet. "If you love us, you'll do the right thing. Otherwise, the community will know who destroyed Brielle's health. Do you want that reputation, Avery? A selfish daughter?" I stopped sleeping. Every creak of the house became a warning. Every night I checked the locks twice, then 3 times. My therapist listened patiently, her pen gliding across the page. "This is financial trauma," she said. "When family ties are used as chains, the injury cuts deeper than money." For a moment, I felt seen. For once, someone had named what I was experiencing without wrapping it in shame. One afternoon, needing air, I bought a young lemon tree and planted it in the backyard. The scent of soil and leaves reminded me of childhood summers when things had felt innocent, before betrayal had a name. I knelt there, hands dirty, wishing I could root myself as firmly as that sapling. When I stepped back inside, mud still clinging to my palms, I opened my laptop to a new message. From my attorney. The subject line froze my breath. "Your family has filed suit against you." The lawsuit landed like a thunderclap. In black letters across white pages, my parents accused me of illegally withholding property agreed to be shared within the family. They called my home a joint investment, the fruit of a verbal contract. I read those words over and over, heat rushing into my face. How could they twist my independence into theft? When I stepped into the courthouse, I braced myself for hostility, but I wasn't prepared for the evidence they presented. On a projector screen, a video played. My face, my voice, my cadence. "Of course, Brielle can have the house," the recording declared. "It's always been for her." My mouth went dry. Every gesture was mine, the tilt of my head, the rhythm of my breath. Noah sat beside me, shifting uneasily. "Avery," he whispered, "you told me once you wanted to help Brielle. Could they have recorded you?" "I never said this," I hissed, my nails biting into my palms. "That video isn't real." The judge nodded gravely, admitting the clip into evidence. My attorney objected, but the damage was already done. I felt the weight of eyes on me, every spectator silently condemning. That night, I tore apart the digital file my lawyer had obtained. Hours slipped by in a blur of scrolling metadata. At last, a faint watermark surfaced, half erased but still legible. Fragments of a model identifier, the kind used in deepfake rendering. My gut clenched. Ethan. My ex-boyfriend, a programmer who once bragged about his experiments in synthetic video. Brielle had always kept in touch with him. My suspicion hardened into near certainty. The revelation burned in my chest. If you were me, would you expose the deepfake immediately or hold it as your final trump card? Expose or hold? Days blurred into hearings. Monica stood before the judge with practiced sorrow. "All we want is fairness for our youngest, Brielle. She's too fragile to be without a safe place." Her words dripped with sanctimony, as though I were not her daughter but a villain. Online forums echoed her narrative, strangers calling me greedy, heartless, a monster who betrayed her own blood. Noah grew distant. One evening, he came to my kitchen, eyes full of pity. "Avery, maybe you should just sign the papers. You'd still have time to start over. At least it would bring peace." His words struck harder than the lawsuit. "You think I should give up my home? Everything I built?" "I think," he said softly, "sometimes peace is worth more than pride." I stared at him, the man who once promised to stand with me. In that moment, I realized he was no longer by my side. The pressure mounted until I could hardly breathe. At one hearing, my lawyer slid the transfer papers across the table. My hands shook so violently the pen slipped. The notary's seal gleamed on the page, ready to brand my surrender. For one terrifying second, I considered it. Maybe giving up would end this nightmare. But my body froze. The pen hovered above the signature line, ink trembling, my mind screaming, "Don't!" I fled the courthouse and called the only person who had ever seen me fight from nothing, my high school teacher, Mrs. Harris. She had watched me bus tables at 16, balancing textbooks and late shifts. When she opened her door, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into an embrace, wordless and steady. The silence was a balm I didn't know I needed. That night, back in my house, I brewed tea and tried to anchor myself in that moment of warmth. Sleep finally took me, shallow and restless. At 3 a.m., the doorbell camera chimed. I grabbed my phone, blinking at the live feed. The grainy image revealed Monica, my own mother, crouched at my front door. She slid a new key into the lock, twisted, and with careful hands replaced the cylinder. My breath hitched as the screen froze on her face, calm, determined, as if she were merely tidying the house she already believed was hers. The morning after I watched my mother replace my locks, something inside me shifted. Fear had ruled me for months, but now clarity carved its way through the fog. The golden frame with its hidden key, Brielle's GoFundMe plea for sympathy, the video that had nearly destroyed me. They weren't separate incidents. They were threads in a web carefully woven to strip me of everything I had earned. In therapy, I found the words I hadn't dared to say out loud. They don't love me. They love what I can give. My therapist leaned forward. Avery, loving your family does not mean submitting to abuse. Love without respect is exploitation. For the first time, I felt the truth settle into my bones. The next week, while digging through old boxes in my attic, I found an envelope stuffed with faded financial documents. I almost shoved it aside until a line caught my eye. My name. My social security number. And beneath it, charges dating back to when I was 17. A credit card opened in my name, unpaid balances that had quietly tanked my score in college. My father's signature scrawled at the bottom. Graham had stolen my identity before I was even old enough to sign a lease. It wasn't just betrayal, it was history repeating itself. They had always seen me as collateral, never as a daughter. Fueled by rage and grief, I dove deeper. With my lawyer's help, I subpoenaed data connected to the video. Hours later, the results came back. Server logs showing the rendering had originated from Ethan's account. My ex, the programmer Brielle still kept close. There it was in black and white, the IP address, timestamps, proof that the so-called confession was manufactured. If you were me, would you file criminal charges immediately or save it as ammunition for civil defense? Criminal or civil? I sat with the choice for hours, weighing vengeance against strategy. Either way, the evidence was mine, and the narrative was beginning to shift. From that moment, I transformed my fear into preparation. I built my arsenal piece by piece. The hidden key taped behind the golden frame. The doorbell clip of Monica swapping locks in the dead of night. Screenshots of Brielle's GoFundMe campaign with her fabricated illness. Every text, every email, every whisper of manipulation collected into a timeline of deceit. My attorney introduced me to a forensic specialist who confirmed what I already knew. The video of me donating my house was a fake, spliced with machine learning precision. The expert promised to testify, to show the court how the angles of my eyes betrayed synthetic stitching, how the metadata carried a signature of artificial origin. Meanwhile, we analyzed the notarized draft agreement my father had pressed into my hands. Under a magnifying glass, the seal revealed inconsistencies. A blurred stamp, an altered date. Forgery, plain and simple. Another lie stacked onto the mountain. At night, I rehearsed my testimony. I refused to let bitterness harden my voice. Instead, I practiced the words until they carried weight without venom. I am not here to destroy my family, I told the mirror. I am here to reveal the truth. The phrasing steadied me. I could be angry without being cruel. I could be determined without turning to stone. For the first time in months, I invited people into my home. Not my parents, not Brielle, but my chosen family. Co-workers who'd slipped encouraging notes onto my desk, neighbors who'd dropped soup on my porch when I stopped eating, and Mrs. Harris, who had held me in silence when I'd nearly given up. We gathered around my kitchen table, sharing lasagna and laughter. For a few hours, I remembered what belonging felt like when it wasn't poisoned by conditions. As the evening wound down, I stepped into the backyard. The lemon tree I had planted weeks earlier glowed pale in the moonlight, its leaves stretching toward the sky. It was fragile, but alive, like me. When I returned to the table, my lawyer was waiting with a sober expression. He slid his phone across the wood. On the screen was a court order. "The judge has approved our request," he said. "You'll be allowed to present the digital forensics evidence at trial." For the first time, I felt the tide shift. They had their performance of martyrdom, but I had the truth. The battlefield had been set. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and nerves. My parents sat at the plaintiff's table, Brielle between them, her eyes downcast as though she were a fragile saint. Their attorney painted a portrait of noble sacrifice, of parents who had poured everything into their ungrateful daughter only to be betrayed. They only want security for their youngest child, he told the judge. Is it so wrong for a family to care for one another? I could almost hear the gallery nodding. The Quinns had always been skilled performers. When it was my turn, I rose, palms damp, but my voice steady. This is not about love. It is about control, and I will show you the truth. On the screen, my timeline unfolded. First, the footage from my doorbell camera. My mother, at 3 a.m., changing my locks as though the house were already hers. Gasps rippled through the room. Next, the golden frame. I held it up, tapped the back panel, and pulled out the taped spare key. A gift, I explained, delivered with the intention of erasing my boundaries. Then came the server logs. My attorney guided the expert witness to the stand, who explained the digital fingerprints that traced directly to Ethan's account. The deepfake, he testified, was synthetically generated, designed to replicate Ms. Quinn's voice and face with near-perfect accuracy. The jury leaned forward, their skepticism giving way to outrage. The defense stammered, but the judge silenced them. Call Ethan Warren to the stand. When Ethan walked in, his confidence faltered under the weight of the evidence. My lawyer projected the IP records, timestamps, and cloud logins. Did you, or did you not, fabricate this video? Ethan's jaw tightened, then cracked. Yes, he whispered. Brielle asked me. She said it was the only way she'd ever forgive me. The room erupted. Brielle's mask shattered, her face twisting as she hissed, "You idiot!" But the judge's gavel cut through the chaos. Then came the question that silenced even me. The judge turned to Monica, my mother, eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Quinn, are you aware that you were recorded replacing your daughter's locks in the middle of the night? Did you consider what that means for your credibility here?" Monica's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. For the first time, she had no script. The rest was inevitable. The verdict fell like a stone. This court finds in favor of the defendant, Avery Quinn. The plaintiff's claims are dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, the court orders reimbursement of legal fees to the defendant. Allegations regarding fraudulent fundraising and forged documentation will be referred to the district attorney for investigation. The gavel struck, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. Around me, silence. Relatives who once applauded Brielle's every post now avoided eye contact. The myth of the perfect Quinn family cracked open on the public record, irreparable. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply stood, gathered my files, and walked out of the courthouse with my head high. From that day forward, I cut contact to the bone. No more midnight calls, no more guilt-laced texts, no more manipulative dinners. I blocked their numbers, closed the doors they had always assumed were theirs to walk through. In the evenings, I returned to the lemon tree. Its leaves had grown stronger, stretching toward the sun. I stood there in the garden, inhaling the faint citrus scent, and for the first time since buying my home, I felt safe. I let my lungs fill completely, exhaling years of weight. Peace was not triumphant. It was quiet, fragile, and mine. That night, as I curled into bed, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number blinked onto the screen. "You don't know everything. Check the attic." My skin prickled. The battle was won, but perhaps not the war. The message haunted me until dawn. At first light, I climbed the narrow ladder to the attic, flashlight trembling in my hand. Dust rose in the beam, swirling like ghosts of the past. Behind a stack of boxes, I discovered a small cedar chest bound with twine. My grandmother's handwriting curled across the lid. "For Avery, when she is ready." I knelt, untied the knots, and lifted the lid. Inside were letters, neatly folded, fragile with age. On top lay a handwritten will. The ink had faded, but the words cut clear. What is earned through sweat should never be called a debt. This house, or any home my granddaughter builds, is hers alone. Tears blurred the page. My grandmother had seen what my parents refused to admit, that my labor, my sacrifice were mine to honor. She had left me not only validation, but liberation. Tucked beneath the will was one last envelope, sealed tightly. My hands shook as I opened it. A single line stretched across the page. If you are reading this, it means someone has tried to steal your future again. Beware and stand tall. I sat back on the attic floor, heart thundering. Even from the grave, she had understood. And she had left me a warning. When the letter surfaced in court records, the narrative shifted again. Neighbors who had believed the Quinn's story came forward with apologies. We were wrong, Avery. We let their performance blind us. Strangers on the internet who once cursed my name now flooded my inbox with remorse. The GoFundMe that Brielle had used as a weapon was shut down. Donors received refunds and some messaged me privately, horrified at being manipulated. My family's grand image collapsed fully, exposed as fraud. But for me, the most profound change was quiet. One evening, I locked the cedar chest, placed it gently back in the attic, and smiled. For the first time, the story was mine, not theirs. I didn't need their validation. I had my truth. Months passed, and peace began to root itself into my days. I started a workshop at the local community center, calling it Boundaries and Belonging. Survivors of toxic families gathered in folding chairs, their eyes carrying the same mix of shame and hope I once carried. I spoke not as a victim, but as someone who had walked through fire and come out breathing. My house, I told them, is not a trophy of victory. It is a symbol of freedom with responsibility. Owning it doesn't make me better. Protecting it makes me whole. The workshop grew. People began to share their stories, weaving a tapestry of resilience. Each session reminded me that family could be chosen, built, nurtured, not dictated by blood or control. One night, I sat at my kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper. I wrote to Monica and Graham, words I never intended to send. I will always be your daughter, but I will no longer be your scapegoat. I refuse to carry debts you created, burdens you disguised as duty. My silence is not hatred, but boundary. My distance is not revenge, but survival. When I finished, I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer. It wasn't meant for them. It was meant for me, a marker of closure. As seasons turned, the lemon tree in the backyard bore its first fruit. I plucked one, held it in my hand, and felt the weight of new beginnings. I understood at last. Justice was never about destroying my family. It was about refusing to let them destroy me. The greatest revenge was not the verdict or the apologies. It was living authentically while they remained trapped in their own poison. And so I leave you with this choice, the one I face each day. Would you choose silent forgiveness or silence eternal? Forgive or silence?